Hello everyone, this is Ohio Dan with another MGTOW video. I wanted to discuss something that I really haven't heard too many content creators touch upon uh, as it pertains to the kind of classic alpha beta paradigm where women are attracted to alpha men but they still want to use other men for whatever it is that makes them happy basically, and how that's become a common theme in relationships and with men and women interacting with one another these days. So, for the most part, men in the manosphere are aware of concepts like hypergamy and the female attraction toward the alpha male. There's also a realization that in today's society, women will often take advantage of the beta male's resources and the stability of a family unit that he can provide while still desiring sexual relations with the alphas. Because nobody really holds women accountable for these kinds of decisions in a gynocentric culture, their sexual and relationship choices, they can just be based on whatever they feel like doing. And they often use multiple men, as I've said, to fulfill different roles rather than settling down with one man. And this has been discussed by Sandman and others about basically having a male harem. Uh, this has been discussed a lot in the MGTOW community, and lots of guys call this alpha fucks beta bucks because that's essentially what it is. Women will have their sexual escapades with the alpha guy, but they're not going to settle down with that guy. They're going to settle down with a man who actually has resources and can take care of her and who satisfies her hypergamy. So, a factor that I haven't seen discussed so far as regards this issue is the developmental aspect behind why women are attracted to alphas and betas in different ways. Aside from what we've already established about being attracted to the alphas for their masculinity and being attracted to the betas for their money. So, aside from our gynocentric culture typically allowing women to make any choices they want without significant consequences, I think that there's another issue here that even in a society that is not slanted so far to just doing what the woman wants, women are still going to be torn between, even if they had to settle down with one guy for the rest of their life, they're still going to be torn between a guy who they think is more alpha and more masculine versus a guy who may have more resources. So, like with so many other aspects of male and female nature, there's a major contrast between how things have been throughout most of our history and then present times. In the past, especially until we reached a point where there was reasonable safety and the rule of law governed people's behaviors, men who had masculine qualities would have been the ones with the most resources because they could take the resources from anybody else who had them, basically. Beta males essentially had no way to protect the resources they may have held from stronger men. So, in a state of nature, alpha males would have dominated in the collection of resources, and they would have been obviously the men who women found more physically and sexually attractive as well. Women would likely not have considered any other group of men to be attractive, and most men simply wouldn't have had the opportunity to reproduce. And we can see this throughout our history using genetic testing. We can see that through various times in human history, a lot of men didn't reproduce. Only a small percentage of men, and that percentage would vary over periods in our history, but the most men did not get to have children. However, most women did have children. They had children with a man who would basically fit this alpha profile and who had enough resources to take care of several different families, basically. However, in more recent history, the number of men who could acquire sufficient resources to raise a family has increased drastically. And the reason is basically because of the opposite situation from what I've described before. Now, because of the enforcement of individual and legal rights, the more alpha men in society can no longer acquire resources by force. We can't just conquer some other tribe and take everything that they have. A man can't just decide that he's going to walk into a home or a cave or whatever time period in history that you're looking at, kill the man who lives there and take his wife and take all the stuff that he has. We can't do that today because there are major legal consequences, obviously. So men who may have been dominant in times past have to play by a new set of rules, while men who don't necessarily fit the alpha description may have lives that are nonetheless quite successful. The way to the top in a society is no longer by being alpha, basically. It's no longer by brute force, or it's no longer by taking from people who have things and basically using your resources to get whatever you want after, stealing them from someone else. You can't do that anymore, obviously. So this creates a schism between what women find naturally attractive. Women want the bad boy who may be totally useless in the new type of society that we have, even though throughout history he may have been one of the leaders of a tribe or of a society. But women also, along with the bad boy, that want the guy who they may not find physically attractive, but who has money. When society, along with all of this, endorses destructive female behavior, you can pretty much predict the level of cheating and promiscuity we'll see in this context. There is no control over the decisions that women make. They don't really have to face the consequences of their actions. They can make men, or they can make society as a whole deal with those consequences, and so they're free to just go back and forth between whatever men they find attractive. So the purpose of this video is not to try to make excuses for women, or for men for that matter, in terms of the relationship choices they make. It's not to say that women aren't in control and it's not their fault somehow. But instead, the point is to discuss the natural cause and effect involved in these kinds of relationship choices. We are ultimately a product of the generations of men and women who came before us. And because our environment has changed so drastically over time, especially recently, the way that men and women interact with each other has much different consequences now than throughout our history as a species. Now, of course, because these changes favor the woman so drastically, it doesn't change anything in terms of the overall equation of going your own way, because trying to live according to traditional relationships is just a very negative thing to do as a man. It doesn't change the fact that men are better off not dealing with most of these kinds of relationships at all. But what it does mean is that women, even in a society that wasn't gynocentric, even in a society that gave men a fair deal and gave them an opportunity to have a family, gave men an opportunity to be treated with respect and to reap the rewards for the good things they do in society. Even in that situation, assuming we'd have the same standard of living and assuming we'd have the same level of safety and security and rule of law that we have now, even though that may be going away soon if society starts to unravel. But assuming that that level of security and that level of men only really being able to compete with each other through legal means, assuming that would continue, women would still be torn between the guy who is the romantic bad boy type, who may be dumb as a brick and may have been in and out of jail in some cases. And you do see women who are attracted to these kinds of men all the time. She may be torn between that kind of guy versus a guy who's stable, who has resources, who's intelligent, who's, whether he's red pill or blue pill is irrelevant in this case, but who, basically plays the role of provider and protector well, but who she may not find physically attractive. Women are going to have to make choices under any circumstances between different men that they may be attracted to. And like I say, in our society, a woman can make any choice she wants. She can choose to have it all, supposedly. That's what society tells women today through feminism and through the idea that they should be able to get whatever they want in a man. So even if she cheats, or even if she is not loyal in a relationship, it's still going to be the man's fault, according to society in most cases. But even in a society that's fair, even in a society where women were forced to choose one life partner, and if they were caught cheating, they would be stoned to death, or at the very least, they would be destitute after their marriage was dissolved somehow. In a society where women actually had to face the consequences of their relationship choices, they would still be torn between the alpha and the beta, because we no longer have any sort of connection to that state of nature, in the sense that the men with resources are not the same men who necessarily have the masculine traits. It would have been easy, relatively speaking, for a woman to make a decision in times past. She would just go after the alpha male who could take care of her. And potentially that alpha male could have several different wives, or several different women that he reproduced with. But today, it's more complicated than that. And so, this is just one of the other additional factors that you have to kind of watch out for as a man, where, you know, women are even less likely to be satisfied with any one man that they have. And this might be the case even in a scenario where somehow we're not gynocentric as a society anymore, and somehow men, at least on paper, have a fair deal in marriage, or beyond that, a man could actually get married and have a family. Even in that case, you would have to watch out for potentially a woman cheating on you with a guy that she thinks is more alpha, or potentially, you know, if you are the more alpha guy, her hypergamy is still going to be there. So ultimately, there is this split between what women naturally find attractive that wouldn't have existed throughout most of our history. And so, as many of us have experienced, it's very difficult for one man to make a woman happy in regard to all these different things that she expects in a man. And it's made so much worse by there being no control in society over the negative elements of female behavior. But even in a society that was more balanced, I think you'd still have this problem, and women would still not really want to make up their mind to settle down with one man.